Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dialogues from Silicon Valley. My name is Vlas Lezen, and I'm Chief Operating Officer at Silicon Valley Innovation Center. Today, we have our wonderful guest in our interview series, Matthew Gerville. Matthew, the strategy, M&A, and innovation expert with a background in market intelligence, consulting, and international trade. Matthew led the development of a new business unit from 0 to 300 employees in its first 3 years through a mix of acquisition, open innovation, and organic initiatives by leading strategy, deals, integration, and CEO board level reporting. Matthew is also an often speaker on our leading digital transformation program and a great friend of Silicon Valley Innovation Center. Hello, Matthew.
Hello.
How are you today?
Doing great, thank you.
All right, awesome. So first, thank you so much for agreeing to speak with us. And we have several questions for you, just kind of general, keeping it in the very flowing interview kind of style going forward. So the first question is that what is the digital transformation to you, given your experience?
Sure. Good question. I get this one pretty often, but I think really digital transformation is about the reinventing of any part of the value chain. It could be on the back office, how you do your accounting or your hiring or whatever, all the way to the things that are customer facing. It's when you are transforming anyone, or in many cases, many of those things, using digital technology to gain an advantage in cost, in speed, in quality, what have you. It's really leveraging that technology to level up any one of those functions.
Definitely. So when you're saying that leveling up with some of those functions, so do you think that necessarily digital transformation, it has to be technology based, or sometimes it can be just more a philosophy, maybe an approach, maybe just a way to do things?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, there's always technology involved, hence the digital aspect. Whether the technology is the visible part and you implement a new tool, or it's simply something that is in the background, that is an enabler that's almost invisible. I think that's less important. I mean, if you think about what the auto industry went through, now a lot of vehicles have updates to their software that's done over the air. You don't really think about it as digital transformation as a consumer. It's just, it's my car updates more often or whatever, I have new features. But really, while it is invisible, it is a massive transformation in not only maintaining better maintenance record, maybe adding feature once the car has already left the dealership lot. There's a lot to it that I think would still qualify as digital transformation, even though it's not visible and you can't easily put a nice bow around it.
No, that definitely makes sense. So do you think that digital transformation has a little bit of the rep, that kind of one of those buzzwords, like big data and AI and innovation? Do you think that digital transformation might be a little bit diluted and kind of everyone doing it and nobody does?
Yeah, I mean, I think you know the answer, right? You've seen my talk. I love to make fun of it. I love to make fun of chief digital officers, chief innovation officers, and all of those people. So yes, obviously, but to me, it doesn't take away from the fact that it is really happening, right? The fact that some people are doing it poorly, or that some people are calling simple things digital transformation just because it sounds good, doesn't take away from the fact that it is actually really happening. So the key here is just make sure that you don't get distracted by the noise. There's a lot of noise, but if you stay focused and you identify things that actually do matter and you do them because they drive a particular results, not doing them just so you can say that you did digital transformation, then you can stay in the clear.
No, that definitely makes sense. So what do you think is the biggest obstacle towards that digital transformation, kind of going to from chief talking officer to the chief doing officer?
Mostly people. People don't like change. Inertia is a very powerful force. People are always afraid. This transformation, it makes my job easier. Does it also make it easier to replace me? This transformation makes it more transparent for management to see what's going on, makes it easier for consumers to make some noise if they're unhappy about what's happening. And so whatever the reason might be, or just simply people don't want to learn a new process, they want to learn a new way of doing things. At the end of the day, it's mostly people and the resistance that is important. One thing, though, I will say that I was less aware of in the past is just there's been so much fragmentation. there's about 3,000 marketing technology startups today. And so, and each of them, has some value, I'm sure, but the cost of doing digital transformation, even though it is sometimes something you do to save money, it's easy to overdo it and end up with 100 different subscriptions to various SaaS offerings that each do a little thing. And so that's another challenge, just managing almost that noise, but that noise in your toolbox, having a toolbox full of tools that you don't know how to use or that don't work together.
So something really interesting that you touched, right? So I think that when people say digital transformation, they often think about kind of like internal, inbound transformation. What can we do internally to make that particular transformation to transform our business? So do you think that current model, the digital transformation, favoring internal transformation or more hiring outside parties to provide, innovation as a service or parts of your business digitized as a service? What is your opinion on that?
I think it varies tremendously by industry. Everyone can digitize the same function that exists everywhere, right? Every company has an accounting department, finance, HR, and so that tends to, or marketing for that matter, since we talked about it, that tends to be digitized pretty early on because there's so much going on and so many startups popping up because they know that if you solve, email marketing, then the world is your oyster and the world is very big. Every single company does email marketing. On the customer facing aspect, then it's a little bit more narrow. You're gonna still see some digital transformation, but you can't always easily digitize everything. You can't necessarily digitize food, but is there a layer somewhere between, the can of bean, I know that was in the news recently, is there a layer to add a digital aspect to this product? Could be something as simple as doing subscriptions where people then purchase from a different sort of point of sale and have a recurring interaction with the brand, with the product. It could be simply a way to gather feedback, a way to handle customer complaints. There's a lot of things on the customer side that you could digitize as well. They don't tend to be as visible from a technology perspective, but they tend to be more visible, obviously, as a consumer.
Oh, that definitely makes sense. Thank you. And then in terms of, again, like transformation and tying together the outside and the inside world, that we often hear from the big companies that, it's too hard, or, the opportunity cost of teaching people something new is too high. How do you address that? And how did you address that in your professional experience?
I think it's just a matter of finding when to take the leap, right? It is costly if you train people, if you always update to a new process, etc. You can't do that every year. And so for some things, you have to improve as a step function, where you do a project that modernizes the way that you handle performance reviews, for instance, where you start gathering data instead of just personal opinion, you start gathering data from systems that you have. And then maybe you accept that this will be a plateau, and for the next 2 years, you don't try to keep improving. You wait until you make another investment to go one more step. So that's one aspect of it. It's also because, as we talked about earlier, people don't want to constantly be learning new things. And there's also sort of a learning curve. And so when you roll out a new technology or a new process, people will have to learn it. And then they will reach peak productivity once they're comfortable with it. And you don't want to constantly disrupt that. You don't want people to always be in a state of trying to figure it out. And by the time they figure it out, you've moved on again. That's not how you can really accomplish the gains in productivity that you were seeking in the first place.
No, that definitely makes sense. And I also remember that during one of our programs, you introduced the card game that you have created. And when I looked through it, there was always like an obstacle card that
right.
was actually used in a lot of cases. And then what do you think in general, right? So kind of talk about the culture transformation, the people, the buy-ins, some of the challenges that companies get in the digital transformation. So what do you think is, besides people, what is like the most common thing that people face when they're thinking about digital transformation?
In terms of obstacles?
Yeah. So like not people, but let's say, we don't have resources. So I don't know, a regulator does not allow us. What is like the most common excuse that people use besides that? Well, we don't really want to do it.
I mean, I think there's two that are tightly related. One is just security. Security is obviously very needed, right? But
Mm.
sometimes if your IT practices are too restrictive, you are limiting the ability for people to experiment. You may have somebody who is wired the right way and very innovative and that tries to find a better way to do something, maybe a new platform to reach out to candidates rather than, using always LinkedIn ads and things like that. But, if your firewall blocks it, if there's all sorts of layers of difficulties in just doing it, then you're basically stifling innovation at the very early stage. You won't even know because those people will be wired to always try new things. And if they can't because their computer won't allow them, then they just decide, well, too bad, I'll just follow the existing process, even though I feel like there's got to be something easier.
No.
So that's one aspect of it. And I think the second aspect, the second facet of that is really around, again, the inertia. And sometimes that manifests itself in terms of over-optimizing, especially as a company gets larger. You say that you want to bring a new process, but people are uncomfortable with the trade-off. Maybe this new process saves you tens of hours per worker per week or per month, but it does compromise with one thing. Maybe it's not as good in that one particular dimension. Maybe the reporting is not quite as good as what you have. It doesn't tick all the boxes in the RFP. And somehow people decide, you know what, let's keep the status quo. It's not working, but it ticks all the boxes because the boxes were created to define it. And so that's one of the challenges. Like, you have to accept that innovation is not always perfect. And sometimes one step forward requires giving up something else on the side.
Yeah, that definitely a reappearing theme, right? Because again, maybe some of the current process, they do create, besides comfort, they might actually create some benefit, but then at the same time, those growing pains feel like pretty much we all have to go through them, whether we grow, whether we change, whether we transform our businesses. I think it's a common theme that there's usually a good way why things are done a certain way, besides just historical reasons, so to speak. No, that definitely makes sense. So maybe as a first step towards the digital transformation, go back to the culture question, to the how do you encourage people? What do you think, in your opinion, is the right steps to build this culture of digital transformation that will allow your company to get, let's say, a more counter inertia inside the organization to actually pull away from the traditional ways of doing things?
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. One is you really want to encourage curiosity. You want to encourage people to experiment, and there are ways that you can do that by hosting events. I don't know, if you host a hackathon and you have students or people from other parts of the industry come in, you expose your people to those new ideas, those new perspective, and that can work to some extent. Then the other aspect is just getting new blood, essentially get new people in the organization. Don't recruit from just one company. Maybe you feel like you have a strong affinity to Google or Facebook or whatever, but if you bring only people from that, you're not getting that much value. Bring people from different horizons, different cultures, different companies, and that will sort of create that curiosity, because as they come in, as they try to ramp up their knowledge of your company, they'll ask a lot of questions, they will question a lot of things, and that will actually help the entire organization sort of develop that mindset of, could we actually do better? Do we have to accept the way we're doing it as the right way, or can we think about it differently?
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. So on that question, right? So do you think that if you can encourage your existing employees to be more creative, or you still need to have this infusion of fresh blood and fresh ideas to make them more creative, more keen towards the digital transformation?
Yeah, you can definitely help with creativity. One thing is incentives. Incentives are very, very hard. I think anyone has ever run a P&L has had this problem where you try to do something and you think you're really smart. If I do this, then my salespeople are going to outperform, they're going to be super motivated, and then you fail to see an unintended consequence. People will game the system and all of that. And so you can actually, one of the best way to drive new behaviors is through incentives. Or the lack thereof, removing a particular metric that people are tracked against. I think Google famously I think it wasn't completely true, but they had this like 20% rule, right, where you were supposed to spend 20% of your time on side project, etc. But at least because there was a metric, there was an expectation. I think they did a lot of that work of generating that aspect of people being curious, people feeling like it's okay, and it's not going to hurt their ability to hit the goal because the goal is to take time off.
Mm.
You can do that as well by removing the price of failure. People are not going to take a chance. They're not going to experiment if they feel like if it fails, their job is on the line. And so within reason, you want to create an environment where it's okay to fail, where it's okay to try something and realize it doesn't work or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, that's all for our time, Matthew. Thank you so much for the short interview, for the short dialogue. Always a pleasure to speak with you. Again, thank you so much, and see you on our Silicon Valley Innovation Center programs. Thank you so much, Matthew.